It's the SNL Hall of Fame podcast with your host, Jamie Dew, Chief Librarian Thomas Senna, and featuring Matt Ardill. And now, curator of the hall, Jamie Dew.
Thank you so much, Doug the Nats. It is fantastic to be here as always. My name is Jamie Dew. I am the host and curator of the SNL Hall of Fame. The SNL Hall of Fame podcast is a weekly affair. Each week we take a deep dive into the career of a former cast member, host, musical guest, or writer, and then add them to the ballot for your consideration. Once the 30 nominees have been announced, we turn to you, the listener, to vote for the most deserving and determine who will be enshrined in the SNL Hall of Fame for perpetuity. Before we go any further, though, I'm going to ask that you please wipe your feet before entering the hall. This is a sanctuary of comedy, as it were, and frankly, unclean feet just don't cut it here. So there's that. Well, you come here for the comedy, the commentary on comedy, but sometimes we talk musical guests, and I'm going to get on my soapbox here once again and talk about a musical guest that I think is a special one, a record-setting musical guest. This week, we are moving our focus to Dave Grohl. Now, it's interesting because Dave Grohl has been on the show 14 times as a member of, well, we'll get into it as the episode goes on, as a member of a number of different acts. But before I get too mired in the depths of Dave Grohl, why don't we check in with our friend Matt Ardill? Oh, Matt, how are you doing this week?
I am terrific, thank you. And you?
I am dynamite. Thanks for asking. So we are going to take a deep dive into Dave Grohl this week in a conversation that Thomas has with Ryan McNeil. But in the interim, I would love to get into your Minutia Minute and hear what you have to say about Mr. Grohl.
Awesome. Dave Grohl, one of the nicest people in the music industry from everything that I've heard. I haven't been blessed with the opportunity to meet him, but this was actually a really important watershed moment in my life when I first saw him performing on SNL. He's born January 14th, 1969. His first appearance, January 11th, 1992, season 17. That's when Victoria Jackson, Dana Carvey, Chris Farley, during that era of SNL. He appeared with the band Nirvana, where he got his start. He then appeared the second time a few years later in 1995, December 2nd, in season 21 with the Foo Fighters. He's performed a whole bunch of times outside of those contexts. Like he performed with Mick Jagger, Tom Petty, his other like super group, Them Crooked Vultures. He's actually been on the episode 14, or he's been on 14 episodes. So this is the most appearances by any musician. Technically, he should be a Platinum Lounge member. I don't know why he isn't. He more than qualifies.
It's because people don't value musical guests on SNL the way they maybe ought to.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Platinum Lounge technically is like musical guest, special contributor, or host. So it's different from the Five Timers. So, but I just don't think people remember the Platinum Lounge. They've only made that joke a few times on the series, whereas the Five Timers has become like quite the ceremony and everything. So I mean, he has been on so many times. I mean, so many great performances. For me, it Smells Like Teen Spirit. That was my heavy grunge days. So I was like mixing up those two very incompatible styles. Like big, big sort of flannel vests that were black and purple and covered in like Celtic knots and silver. It was a mess. It was a hot mess in the 90s. but yeah, I mean, his appear. I think one of the things that make him so special in his appearances is they've always kind of been special in return. Like the Nirvana episode, the first time he performed with Nirvana there, because he performed twice with Nirvana. Was when Weird Al had Victoria Jackson sneak a phone into the dressing room, so Al could ask Nirvana if he could cover "Smells Like Teen Spirit," and that was the moment that Kurt Cobain felt that they had made it as musicians, according to Nirvana lore, which I could see. Like being a kid growing up when he did. To have Weird Al say, "I want to parody one of your songs," is like quite the honor.
Yeah.
But I mean, he's done amazing things. Like he's battled Animal from the Muppets. He did that great sketch, Punk Band at a Wedding.
Yes.
Which is so terrific. And even just like little cameos. Like he did this one. Which was the strip club DJs. So he just sort of like came up, and it was just like came up as just played a creepy DJ at a strip club for like 30 seconds. Just 30 seconds. But it was like just that perfect like, oh, he can take a joke and make a joke kind of thing. So yeah. So but he's a great person, and he's given a lot to the show. So I mean, if anybody would make a good fit to the Hall of Fame, I certainly feel it would be Dave Grohl.
Excellent. All right, well, let's go to that conversation now with Ryan McNeil and Thomas Senna.
Setting the table a little bit as far as Dave Grohl's history with the SNL Hall of Fame, because he does have a history. I know this is only season 2 of the SNL Hall of Fame, but Dave Grohl does have a history with us because he was part of Nirvana, who was a nominee for season 1 of the SNL Hall of Fame. So Dave Grohl does have history with us. Unfortunately, Nirvana is off of the SNL Hall of Fame ballot. They didn't get enough votes to stay on the ballot, but I looked at that as an opportunity for another nominee, being Dave Grohl. So thank you so much, Ryan, for joining me today. And I wanted to ask you, first off, what project of Dave Grohl's first caught your attention?
It was Nirvana. And if we're kind of putting a cherry on them being off the ballot, I do agree with it. In prep for this show, I actually watched all of Dave's appearances, and that took quite some time. That was I'd had a long, hard shift, and that was actually a really great way to cap off a long day of spending basically a good hour and a half, 2 hours of just watching song after song. And watching those two appearances by Nirvana in 92 and 93, in 92 and 94, it does seem, wait, hold on. When were there two?
So it was January 11th, 1992 was their first one, and September 25th, 1993.
That's okay.
It was the season premiere of
with Charles
season
Barkley.
19. Yes.
Yeah. So those two, I mean, they're doing their thing. They're doing their thing really, really well. But in the larger landscape of SNL, it's kind of just a blip. They've had musical acts come in and make a larger statement. Sometimes even just with one appearance. But Nirvana's Nirvana's moment on the landscape is not a very, very big one, but that was where I came in. That second performance, that season premiere in 93, that's one of those specific memories I have of watching that. I was with a friend up at his cottage, his family's cottage, and it got cable reception, which at the time was a rarity at a cottage. I know now cottages in Canada are really tripped out, but at the time, like, you know, if you had an indoor bathroom, your cottage was kind of, you know, with running water, your cottage was swank. So having cable was really quite something. And we watched that episode of them performing Heart-Shaped Box and then Rape Me at the end. And I remember getting to the end of that first number and thinking, cool. My brain was just blown I think that was the first time I'd probably seen them really perform live. He was like, what the hell was that? And not long after that, our friendship started to splinter. I want to blame Nirvana, but I mean, that might be mean. So yeah, that was where I came into it. Dave is the drummer, for Nirvana, which is, having watched everything again, is a little bit ironic because in his SNL career, his 2 appearances with Nirvana, he's very, very much in the background.
Oh, definitely.
Seems like a nervous little bunny. Like, if you look at him, his eyes are really scared in that moment of being on live TV, of being on that stage. And it's like, don't screw up, don't screw up, don't screw up. Like, that seems to be what's happening on his face in both of those performances, when you can even see him. Like, that's back when the drum riser was up off the stage by a good 2 or 3 feet. So he's actually kind of hard to see in those first 2 performances, unless the camera gets there. And the camera wasn't doing what the camera does now for the musical performances. So it's funny that's where I came in. That's where he comes into the fray, in these moments where he's not nearly as accomplished as he would become and visibly petrified.
Yeah, and I remember it's a weird memory too of Nirvana doing the promos leading up to the episode. I think it was all 3 of. I think it was Dave Grohl, Kurt, and Chris Novoselic doing promos leading up to the SNL episode, and they all had that nervous energy. I think all of them were a little nervous. I mean, Kurt is known as the reluctant rock star, I think, in hindsight, but I think at that point, Dave Grohl might have been as well. So I'm not shocked that you noticed that nervous energy when he appeared with Nirvana. I even noticed it at his first appearance on SNL with Foo Fighters.
Yeah, I mean, so that not to skip too far ahead, but that was the ultimate takeaway of watching all 14 performances beginning to end, was watching the evolution of a rock star. You know, watching him, I mean, they're kids. We keep forgetting that these bands start out so young. You know, they seem so huge to us because we get into them young ourselves, but they're kids, right? And watching him go from, you know, I guess he would have been 25, 26 at the beginning, maybe even 24, to him now, and watching all of that performance just day after day after day, and how much it has made him a better musician, a better singer, a better guitarist, much more comfortable on stage. Like, now he can command a stage, where at first he was this nervous bunny. And seeing that play out in real time.
I watched every performance as well, and that was such a thrill. And you're exactly right. That's one of the huge takeaways, was seeing that evolution of a rock star. We had mentioned his first 2 appearances on SNL were with Nirvana. So that was season 17 and season 19. He appeared with Nirvana. We should say that all told, 14 appearances, which is a record for a musician on SNL. I know Dave Grohl is proud of that record. If you've read his autobiography, he mentions it in his autobiography, how proud he is. He does mention that SNL is his favorite show too, but he mentions how proud of he is specifically of holding that record.
He also talks about how it got him into music, and it's interesting to hear what he cites as his Nirvana, watching Nirvana at the cottage moment, for him, was watching the B-52s play Rock Lobster. Dave is kind of an odd duck. Like, Dave can be a bit of a crusty stick in the mud for what is and is not real rock and roll, but there's times where he really lends himself to much more poppy things. And yeah, to him talking about the B-52s being one of the things that, you know, I would have thought he would have mentioned something like The Clash or The Replacements or something like that. But yeah, no, him talking about the B-52s doing Rock Lobster, it shows that this show is in his blood. And it surprised me when we were kind of setting up this show, talking about doing a show for Dave Grohl, that he was the one who's been in on as many times. And it's not even close. Like, the second is Paul Simon with like 8 or 9.
Mm-hmm.
That
Yeah.
I would have thought it was Simon, because Simon's been around for this basically the whole time of the show. Didn't he was on the first episode, wasn't he?
He was on, at least one of the first handful of
First
episodes.
season, yeah. I would have thought it was him. I would not have thought it was somebody out of the 90s.
Or McCartney. I would have thought maybe Paul
McCartney would have made
too,
sense.
but
Even, we'll get there, but like even Tom Petty would have made sense to me. Yeah, an alt-rock act out of the 90s is surprising that that's the leader.
yeah, it's just really nice to, after reading his autobiography, just how much he gushes about SNL and how much you said the B-52's Rock Lobster performance really had a big impact on him. You did mention Tom Petty. We can kind of talk about that now. Season 20, episode 6. Of course, this was November 19th, 1994. This was a few months after Kurt Cobain passed away. Nirvana's no longer a band. Dave's in this still in the kind of this mode of like figuring out his next thing. Big thrill for him. Tom Petty asks him to perform with the band, right?
I mean, so the first number they perform is You Don't Know How It Feels, which is a great number. And it has one of the most iconic and simplest drum lines in rock history. And again, you look at Dave's face and he's petrified. he's still doing, like, it's like, it is ridiculously simple. It's really a thump, 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 like, no complicated to it. But he's like, don't speed up, don't speed up, don't speed up. You could see it. And again, his drums are rised off the stage. You'd notice that would completely disappear as time goes on, and he is no longer the drummer anyway. But you can barely see him. But when you do see him, he's got, like, I mean, there's times where he's really joyful and happy to be there, like when he's singing the backup and that kind of thing. But when he's doing that You Don't Know How It Feels drum line, he's like, you can see in his eyes, don't speed up, don't speed up, don't speed up. It was really beautiful to see that moment. He does kind of let a little bit more loose on the second number in that episode when they play Honeybee.
Yeah.
What I like about that is you can see that he belongs. Like, he's not just some Captain Caveman, like, heavy-handed drummer who can just kind of keep time. He really can fit in with some real rock and roll legends who have come before him.
And I think part of that nervousness was maybe a couple of factors. First off, that we had mentioned he loves SNL so much. He might be nervous just because he's on SNL, this show that he grew up watching. He cites it as his favorite show. He might be a little nervous just because of that. And also playing with Tom Petty. Tom Petty asked him to be part of this SNL performance, but Petty also I think he was floating the idea around of Dave Grohl maybe joining the band permanently or semi-permanently. So I think just playing with Tom Petty, Grohl probably wanted to prove himself in a lot of ways to Tom Petty, who's this legend right in front of him. So that was season 20. And then Foo Fighters emerges out of all of this. Lucky for us rock fans, Foo Fighters emerges. So the next time, or the first Foo Fighters appearance, the fourth Dave Grohl appearance on SNL was season 21, episode 7. That was December of 1995. They are promoting their debut, the self-titled album that was released that summer. So do you have any fond memories of that album and this SNL appearance in particular?
I remember thinking that album was really cute. I mean, that was when alternative music kind of took a turn around 95. Like, it started getting much more produced. It started widening out the scope of what it wanted. It started leaning more over towards pop. And I say this as somebody who loves that music. Like, I'm not sitting here saying like that's not real alternative. I don't believe in such things. And this was kind of part of that. Their songs were much more polished than his beginnings with Nirvana. The funny thing about it, though, is that when he then shows up on SNL to perform live as Foo Fighters, so now we're into kind of the key of what we're going to talk about here. This one particular band with a couple digressions. They're still not, we're talking about the evolution of a rock star. Here's the evolution of a band. Like, you watch that first performance and there's a lot of things that don't seem right. His hair is like screamingly long. He's still doing the drummer thing where it was like down past his shoulders. He's a little flat. Like, he's not singing as well as he will later on in life. Although he can, and I think that this is something he might have learned in Nirvana, he can scream on key, and that's not easy.
Yeah.
So you're watching that, and that's the thing, is watching those, again, these songs that are written with just so much youthful energy and angst and anger and unrest and whatever, watching them get released out into the world by artists who aren't necessarily completely in control of their craft yet. It's interesting to see it and then be witness to what it will evolve into. So watching that, I didn't watch that. I might have watched that performance live. My memory on that part is a little fuzzy, but watching it now, I'm like, you guys are going to get so much better. And if I had paid a ticket to see that show, I would have been like, they're okay. They're better in the studio than they are live. So I watched that and I was really happy that they stuck with it and they kept going and kept growing. Their second number in that show, For All the Cows, it's so sweet. Like, watching that beginning, that was the one thing I did take away from that, is how they had more than one thing in them. They weren't just doing the 4/4 rock at the whole time. They could do something that was actually a little jazzy.
Yeah. Both of those performances, they were a little unpolished, I would say. And you're right, we were watching Dave Grohl trying to find himself as a frontman during that period. They performed "I'll Stick Around" as the first song, and then, as you mentioned, for All the Cows in the second song. And I think, pretty good song choice. Of course, I mean, they probably had to perform "I'll Stick Around." That was kind of their I think their first big single. What struck me is just watching Dave try to find himself as the front man. I think in a lot of ways with Nirvana, he was comfortable just being the wild drummer, being the animal-like drummer. But this performance was super interesting to me. It's going to get better after this, but you're just watching Dave sort of dip his toe into being this leading man rock star that we know him as in 2022. And what I find interesting too, after this, they released The Color and the Shape in 1997, which was a huge album. It had Monkey Wrench, Everlong, My Hero, but they did not appear on SNL to promote it, which was interesting. I mean, tour schedules being what they are, or, schedules, but I find it interesting that we see all these, we're going to talk about a few of these appearances afterward, but this huge album, this is the album that got me into Foo Fighters, quite honestly. This is what really grabbed me, and no appearance on SNL.
I mean, it's funny because it takes a while. It takes all the way until their Christmas episode in season 43 for them to play Everlong. And they don't even play all of Everlong. Right. They just play like the first verse as the lead into something else. So these iconic moments are kind of skipped over.
The next appearance, though, they're promoting There's Nothing Left to Lose in November of 99. In my opinion, Dave seemed a lot more confident during this performance. He was kind of feeling himself a lot more here.
This, for me, watching it back, was kind of the in-between moment. He's got the really short hair at this time, which again, now looking back, doesn't look right. His voice is way better. His voice is so much better. He's really, I don't know if it's because he's a little skinnier at this time or because the style at the time was really, really like tailored clothes. But I noticed that he's often stomping like he's drumming. Like it seems like he's not quite like he's more comfortable as a frontman, but still kind of wants to be behind a kit.
Yeah.
Like, and that's the thing is the way he is stomping is so clearly a pedal. And he's stomping on a time, like he's either stomping on the snare time, or he's either stomping on the bass time, or he's stomping on the cymbal time. And it's once you notice it, you'll never not see it. So it's like, I mean, they sound better. They like already, just every time they show up, they're better than the time before, but they're not quite what the Foo Fighters that we know and love just yet.
But super, super high energy, more polished, way high energy. They performed a Learn to Fly, and then they performed a really high energy Stacked Actors. Stacked Actors was, to me, kind of Foo Fighters launching themselves into kind of the SNL stratosphere. I just loved the energy that they brought with that performance. I mean, it's an energetic song, but it's just awesome to see this band evolve. They had been, I guess, a band. They'd released their first album 4 years prior to this, so it was just really great. It's just
really quick evolution.
Yeah, quick evolution, really great evolution to see. And about 4 years later, they appeared on a Christopher Walken hosted episode. They played All My Life as the first song on that episode.
What did stick out to me is at this point, now they're fully formed. His guitaring is incredible. His voice is fantastic. He seems as confident as he's ever going to get. He looks his hair, like, again, his look is right. It's like, okay, now you guys are, if I were to put that episode on now, somebody would be like, oh yeah, hey, the Foo Fighters. If I were to put those first few on, somebody might say, wait, who's that? You know, like this is where they are now, you know, fully shaped, and they are still going to actually keep getting better as their songwriting goes on. But as far as the lineup they had, like, this is a band that went through a few lineup changes and their own musicianship. What year was this again?
This was 2003.
Yeah. So, I mean, Dave now is more than 10 years into his professional career. You know, of like full rock stardom, not even garage bands and whatever he was doing in the first part of his life. He's 10 years as a mainstream musician. You can see the hours he's put in on every front. And yeah, like this, like at this point, you're like, oh yeah, this is why they keep coming back. Like they just basically, they get a call from a producer to show up for an episode, and they know that they're just going to rip the roof off the joint and not have to worry about something twice in an episode.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, by this point, Foo Fighters is becoming old reliable for SNL.
Yeah.
This is a musical guest what we don't have to worry about. We know they're going to bring the energy. We know that they're going to take it seriously. We know Dave loves the show. And by this point, again, February of 2003, old reliable, and that's a compliment. That's definitely a compliment, because there's a reason why he and the band had been back so often.
Well, what's great about this too is you mentioned they played All My Life, and Jack Black brought it up in their Rock Hall of Fame induction ceremony. He goes, the riff for All My Life is so absurdly simple. It's one note over and over and over, and yet it still slays. So, you know, like trotting that out at midnight, just, you know that it's going to work.
After this, I got to say, I'm going to call Dave Grohl out and the show out. No Probot appearance for Dave. If nobody knows out there, Probot was Dave Grohl's project. It was his sort of homage to death metal, or not death metal, but just kind of like heavy metal, I should say, in general. And so it was kind of, he brought in a lot of heavy metal icons, and it was kind of Dave Grohl's just sort of heavy metal side project. It just kind of had that in there. Like, you appear all this time with Foo Fighters and Nirvana, and we don't see Probot.
No, they couldn't sell them on that one.
They couldn't sell SNL on that one, but they did again sell them on appearing in 2005. So they were promoting In Your Honor. And here's where I think the connection between Dave Grohl, Foo Fighters, and SNL starts really rearing its head for an SNL geek like me. So this was Kristen Wiig's first show. This was episode 5 of season 31. So Kristen Wiig joined the cast in the 5th episode. So Foo Fighters played. It was Kristen Wiig's first show. They play DOA. They play Best of You.
Well, I swear I'll never give in. No, I refuse. Will someone get him the best, the best, the best, the best of you? Will someone get him the best, the best, the best, the best of you?
By this point, they are they're just humming at this stage, like comparing them. I dare somebody to watch those two shows back to back, the self-titled episode and the episode for In Your Honor, because it's incredible to see a band just grow that much while still very much doing the same type of music. They're not the kind of bands like, like your Prince or like your Radiohead or like your U2, who's going to have different phases. Like, they've really been doing guitar rock for 25 years now, but just seeing them hone it and get it sharper and sharper and sharper every time is really something.
So that was promoting that album again, was In Your Honor, and that was Dave Grohl's 7th appearance on the show. 2 years later, I mean, Dave Grohl's just becoming an SNL institution at this point, and Foo Fighters is at this point. So they appear in an interesting episode to me. It's hosted by John Bon Jovi, which is important because I don't know if I should shake my fist at John Bon Jovi, but Foo Fighters only got to perform one song during this show, which I'm sure, Dave Grohl probably has respect for Bon Jovi, but Foo Fighters performed The Pretender.
What if I say I'm not like the others? What if I say not just another one in your place? You're a pretender. What if I say never surrender?
And that was the one song that I performed that night.
This album was where I finally caught up with them live on this tour. And, even being 3 rows from the back of the arena, they still blew the roof off the place. So it's a number that's near and dear to my heart, The Pretender.
Yeah. There's such a great live act too. I was fortunate enough to catch them in May of 2000 with the Red Hot Chili Peppers in Albuquerque, New Mexico. My sister, so nice of her. That was a graduation gift for me, a high school graduation gift. She got me and my cousin tickets to see Red Hot Chili Peppers and Foo Fighters in Albuquerque. And much respect to Red Hot Chili Peppers, but Foo Fighters kind of blew them out of the water that night.
Right. Yeah.
Which is not it's not a complete surprise when you know just how energetic and great Foo Fighters live performances are. That's the only time I've seen Foo Fighters, though, are over 22 years ago now. So one band that I have seen was Them Crooked Vultures, which was the side project. Are you familiar? Do you want to explain Them Crooked Vultures to our listeners who might not be familiar?
So once again, Dave likes to wander. Dave likes to every now and then kind of just, there's no animosity amongst the Foo Fighters. Like, they've had a lineup change or two, but they're not what you'd call, a band that's really gone through a lot of personnel changes. And part of that, I think, is they all respect each other. And, if one of them wants to go off and do a little side project, they're like, yeah, okay, go ahead. Well, we know we're going to schedule the album recording for around now. We're going to do the tour for around now. Whatever you want to do in between them and now is your own time. So Dave takes advantage of this now and then, and he does, projects like Probot. Them Crooked Vultures was another one of his, which is basically this alternative supergroup with Josh Homme from Queens of the Stone Age. Dave sometimes would show up on Queens of the Stone Age stuff as well, so that wasn't really a big surprise.
Yeah.
And John Paul Jones, of all people, and yeah, they release an album. It slays. It's much more like classic rock informed than it is alternative. And Dave's in good with SNL at the time, so he gets to perform that album. Like if he missed his Probot shot, but he got it with them Crooked Vultures.
Yeah, exactly. And a good performance.
His drumming is way better. Like
than
the Nirvana performances and the Tom Petty performances, it's like, even though you haven't really been drumming for the last 15 years, you've been out front playing guitar and singing, you are clearly much more of an accomplished musician, that your chops are better for starters, and you look more comfortable behind the kit. There's not that look of panic that was there the first 3 times.
Yeah, exactly. I actually did notice that too. Good for him. And this was a really cool episode for Dave as well, because he actually appeared in a sketch. He was in the final sketch of the evening.
I missed that.
Yeah, so it was a sketch where he was in a band with Fred Armisen, Bill Hader, and Ashton Kutcher, who was the host that night. And Fred Armisen plays a dad whose daughter is getting married, and he asked the daughter if it's okay if he gets the old band back together from like 1983 to play a song at the daughter's wedding. And as I mentioned, him, Bill Hader, and Ashton Kutcher and Dave Grohl are this band. Dave's on drums, and the band is actually this punk, like anarchist punk band.
Right.
So they play this like loud song and go crazy, and it's great. And Dave actually has lines in the sketch.
Hey, go easy on us, guys. This is our first gig since like 1983.
I guess when you get right down to it, rock and roll always endures.
Unlike my prostate.
When musicians try to get into the sketch, it can be a dicey proposition.
Yeah, no.
Case in point, anytime a musician hosts, it's either going to be really good or really terrible. There's no in between.
And I'm not sure if Dave necessarily, I don't know, I'm kind of halfway surprised he hasn't hosted, but he had some lines in this sketch, and he came off pretty well. He didn't flub any of his lines. He was singing in the sketch, and there was a mic that shorted out, and that wasn't his fault. But
Gotcha.
Really memorable sketch. I think it seemed like it had to have been a Fred Armisen penned sketch that he included Dave in. So that was a highlight for me when he appeared in season 35 with them Crooked Vultures. His next appearance was April 9th, 2011. As far as Foo Fighters appearances goes, and this was with Foo Fighters, pretty straightforward, unremarkable, probably compared to a lot of his other appearances. They were promoting Wasting Light by that point.
I mean, the thing about the band at this stage is they're gonna really start doing the same sort, like, and every band most bands start doing this, is they kind of get into their groove, and then they're just gonna do their groove over and over and over. So Foo Fighters at this stage, they are what they are. They're making great money off it. They're touring really well off it. They're winning awards off it. They are not in any kind of mood to change the formula. So the records, and I say this as somebody who enjoys them, the records from Echoes, Patience, Silence, and Grace forward all are very interchangeable. You could make a playlist of all that era of the band's career, and it would very much sound as though it all came from the same album. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It will lend itself to their performances, like their staging, their sound. It's all gonna kind of standardize itself, that you know what you're going to get, which, I mean, it works in their advantage. Yeah. If somebody's thinking about booking them, you know what they're going to do for you. So why not? But, as far as anybody who wants to see something novel or is tuning in to see, well, what are they going to do this time? Like, they're not Kanye. You know what I mean? They're not Prince in that respect. Even though they love Prince, they have very, they had a fondness for Prince that they said seemed to be one way. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with that with musicians, but as far as the next bunch of full band performances, like you say, like, there's nothing really remarkable about them. They're all very kind of, mirrors of one another with the exception of the Christmas number, which we'll talk about in a second, and their second performance of Times Like These in 2020 for other reasons, which we'll get to.
Exactly. Yep. And they're not a band that SNL would book and wonder if they're gonna produce duds. I mean, no, they're not gonna produce duds. They might not have these elaborate, we said Kanye West or even like Katy Perry coming on or Billie Eilish in recent years, but they're just gonna come out, give some energy, and keep the momentum of the show going. Their next performance on SNL, this was Dave Grohl's 10th, I believe, or 11th appearance. He's already in double figures by this point. And the host is Mick Jagger, and that's notable in this episode because they perform 2 songs on this episode with Mick Jagger. And also, they're a part of a trio of musical guests with Arcade Fire and Jeff Beck.
And I believe, if you want to talk about symmetry, isn't this Kristen Wiig's last show?
Exactly. So we had mentioned Foo Fighters performed on Kristen Wiig's first show, and you're exactly correct. This is Kristen Wiig's last episode.
You can see how much they're all enjoying themselves. The Stones' music, by comparison, has changed a lot since they recorded it. Like, if you listen to the numbers they sang on this episode, 19th Nervous Breakdown and It's Only Rock and Roll, if you play those records and you listen to how they perform them now on a stage, it's very, very different. They're much louder. They're much more grinding. I actually think there's a lot less musicianship, just in terms of how, like, it's a little bit more homogenous, but it's a lot louder. They hold their own. Nobody seems to be starstruck by Mick Jagger, even though they probably all were and should have been. It's a fun night. Like, you can kind of tell that the mood in the studio was high, and just with all these different people there, they were really, really jacked to be there. And knowing it was like Kristen's last night, that there's 2 others left that night, Sandberg and somebody else. It was their last show. But Sandberg and Wig for sure, and they were like a part of the same class. But it was really, really very much about Kristen that night. So you could just tell that the mood there was great.
Yeah, and this episode to me speaks a lot about Dave Grohl's Hall of Fame candidacy and how important he and Foo Fighters were and are to the show, because they weren't promoting an album at this point. They were just asked to be a part of this special night, along with Mick Jagger, Jeff Beck, and Arcade Fire. That Dave Grohl was conceivably one of show's first calls as far as, you want to be part of this special night with us. That says a lot about Dave Grohl and Foo Fighters. And it's a really great moment too. You can see Dave on stage at the end singing Ruby Tuesday along with everyone else to say kind of goodbye to Kristen Wiig. That was a really memorable recent moment in SNL history. The goodbye to Kristen Wiig. She's dancing with everybody. She finishes like by dancing with Lorne Michaels, and just watching Dave on stage singing Ruby Tuesday with everybody else, like, that it was a great moment for him to be a part of that too.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, like, he's been on there so many times that he's some version of friends with a lot of these people who are now starting to leave.
Yeah, exactly. It was probably a little emotional for him too.
Probably.
And so you had mentioned the Christmas performance that he was a part of.
So this is up there as one of my favorite SNL music performances ever. I say this as somebody who's watched a lot of them, and a bunch of them stick in my brain. But this is one of the ones that really, really jumps out because, so first of all, they go out there and they do The Sky is the Neighborhood up for the first number. Nothing really remarkable about it. Like I said before, you could kind of drop it into any of the other albums that have come before over the last few years. It's a good song. Nothing bad about the song. It's just they do what they do. And then, again, that second number, you don't always know what you're going to get. That second number, it could be an upcoming single. It could be an old number. It could be like a deeper album cut. And this is when they start. It's just Dave and his guitar at the beginning, and he's in a Christmas sweater, so you can kind of tell something's afoot. And he starts singing Everlong. And yeah, it's the first time he's got to sing Everlong on the show. 20 years now after it dropped? Are we talking?
Yeah, it dropped in 97.
And
then we had mentioned that they didn't go on SNL to promote that album.
No. So
yeah, here's Everlong a little bit.
Yeah, so here's like the first verse or so.
Hello, I've waited here for you ever long. Tonight I throw myself into, and out of the red, out of her head she sang, do 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 do.
And then they just go full bore Christmas.
The only thing I'll ever ask of you, gotta promise not to stop when I say when. She said,
The snow's coming down. I'm watching it fall. Got some people around. Baby, please come home.
They start playing Baby Please Come Home, and they seg into the Peanut song, Linus and Lucy, which is like one of my very favorite holiday numbers. Like when I start putting Christmas songs into my daily playlist around like the US Thanksgiving, that's one of the first ones to go in because it gets me in the mood in the morning. But of course they perform it their way, which is instead of the piano line, it's a guitar line, and they're just wailing. They're all decked out. They've got like fake snow coming down. Taylor Hawkins is kind of dressed like an elf. It's just pure joy. And, you would expect like rock stars back in the day needed to seem above this kind of thing. Like rock stars, they couldn't be about having fun. It had to be about being dark or being mysterious, or that kind of thing, or even being dangerous. You couldn't just go out there and like have full blown holiday fun.
Yeah.
And they own it. It's this like 3-number segue from one to the other. And it's just so magical. I love it to death.
Yeah. And that was just such a wonderful performance, and like you said, like a departure from what you would expect, and then just kind of them having a lot of fun too. That was great. And the one that I was kind of thinking of too was the one in 2012 with he actually joined Paul McCartney. It was when Martin Short hosted. And
we'll get there because that's an interesting. There's an interesting thing about that one, I mean, we can jump straight to that because
What do you think? What do you find interesting about that one?
So one of the first interesting things about that is the lead up to it, because that was around the time that Nirvana was going to be inducted into the Rock Hall of Fame. There was chatter that they were going to stage some sort of reunion on SNL. Chris Novoselic kind of left music. Like I think he's a politician now, isn't he?
Yes.
He didn't really, after Nirvana ended, he didn't stay with it. Dave, of course, was doing Dave's thing. They're still, super duper close, but they never brought that back in any way, shape, or form. And you can say what you will about that. I think that's a good thing because I like things to end. I don't necessarily need to go back to high school and have a reunion every 2 or 3 years. So there was chatter about like maybe they're going to do something. And Dave at the time was working on this documentary about the Sound City Studios in Los Angeles, where they had recorded Nevermind. Tom Petty recorded some stuff back in the day. I think Joan Jett recorded there. A lot of bands have recorded in Sound City. And as part of that project, he got Paul McCartney to cut this song with him and Chris, and somebody else is with them too. It might be Pat Smear again, called Cut Me Some Slack. And that's what they end up doing. So in a way, Nirvana gets back together on SNL with Paul McCartney out front now, which is kind of fitting. But yeah, I know, which is kind of fitting because Kurt loved the Beatles. And I mean, how many musicians out there can say that they've performed with Mick Jagger and Paul McCartney, let alone on the same show?
Yeah, and Tom Petty.
And Tom Petty.
Jeez. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're talking about SNL Hall of Fame candidacies, and you have Dave Grohl with his own work, with his two main bands, Nirvana and Foo Fighters, hit one of his side projects, and then he just pops up with Paul McCartney,
Legends with
Tom Petty,
absolute icons.
Yeah, it's amazing. The fact that he's so respected, not only by the show, but by the music legends at large, to do things like that is just pretty incredible.
It's fun to see him behind a kit again, because again, like we were saying with like them Crooked Vultures, he's playing a lot better. You know, he even jokes in his book, his daughter asks him to teach her how to drum, and he's like, "Are you sure you want me to teach you?" But he is drumming a lot better than he was early in his career. And yeah, the song, Cut Me Some Slack, it slays. It's a great song.
And you had mentioned when you were talking about that Christmas episode that they perform like the Christmas medleys and stuff. That's one of your favorite SNL performances. One of my favorite, it's possibly, I haven't thought about this too much, but it is one of my all-time favorite musical performances on SNL. It's when they appeared November 7th, 2020. The host, Dave Chappelle, I think it's appropriate to kind of set up that evening. That was the day that Joe Biden officially defeated Donald Trump in the U.S. presidential election. And there was just going into that, so everybody found out that morning or early afternoon. And then all of a sudden it was that day, what's SNL going to do? What's the show going to be like? Everybody was feeling a certain way about the world in general, about the country in general, about the U.S. in general. People wanted to see what was going to happen on SNL that night. Dave Chappelle's hosting, which was great, perfect host for something like that. And the musical guests, Old Reliable, awesome. Foo Fighters, musical guest that night. Their first song, good rendition of Shame, Shame. But one of my favorite all-time musical performances on SNL was when they performed Times Like These. And I'm getting chills just thinking about that and talking about it and reliving it. It was a more subdued, emotional performance of the song at the beginning, and then it just sort of popped off into a celebration. And I, like I said, I have chills just thinking about that performance. It sort of encapsulated what a lot of people were feeling.
A lot of people kind of going into that episode were really, anybody who was superstitious looked at that episode when it was announced and really kind of held their breath, because Chappelle was the host the week that Donald Trump was elected. So there were people that are like, you really don't believe in karma, do you? Like,
tempting
you really
fate.
Yeah, you are really doing this. All right. Yeah, going like I think now, if you weren't like in the future, if somebody wasn't alive during that time, trying to explain the mood of that week is going to be so difficult. Like the tension leading into that of, 6 months of pandemic, someone in the office, in the most powerful office in the world, who just seemed to court chaos daily. Regardless of whether you like him or dislike him, the one thing that you have to admit is just there was never any day where things were calm.
Exactly.
And not even because the world was a storm, especially. Like, I mean, it felt like he brought the storm. And then we get to this moment where it's like, okay, it's decision time for this one person in this one country in this moment that's affecting the whole world. And everybody was holding their breath for, a week, because it was a global crisis that couldn't release the results of an election in a normal time. Like, back normally you find out who the leader is by the end of the night. By time to go to bed, who's won, or certainly by the time you get up the next morning, who's won. But because things had to move so much slower, because of the crisis, it was this week-long, white knuckling. So we get to this pop culture moment that everybody's used to at Saturday night at 11:30, and it was cathartic, is what it was, in a song that says, "There's times like these we learn to love again." It was a beautiful thing to do. It's not very often that an SNL performer performs the same song over the course of their career. Like, you don't often get it when they're coming back for a second performance and they decide, one, to perform an old song. I mean, it happens once in a while, but do a song they did before.
Yep.
You know, that's rare. So they know the power of that song. It tends to be kind of late in their show if you've seen a live show, and they knew in that moment like what it meant to everybody.
It's also a rare time where a musical performance closed an episode, and I think it was perfect of the show to allow that song to be the final note for that episode, the final release.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned, it was just so cathartic, and something about it starting off just more subdued and I guess, contemplative feeling in a way, into this release of energy. I mean, that was perfect. And then no more sketches after that.
Yeah.
It closed the show perfect. It might be just kind of hashing it out right now, might be my favorite musical performance I've ever seen on the show. Goosebumps.
I'd have to take pen to paper. Like, if you want to put it in the show notes for this episode, I can give it a long, hard think and think about what my other 4 favorite performances would be. But that Christmas performance would definitely be one for me.
I guess we got to talk about briefly an unfortunate thing that happened earlier this year. March 25th, 2022, Taylor Hawkins, drummer of Foo Fighters, passed away. And we don't know as of now. We're recording this in October of 2022, and we don't know if Foo Fighters will continue as a band, like without Taylor. That's up in the air for Dave and everybody else.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I hope so. I know like it's going to be tremendously hard for them. Like grief is such a difficult thing to navigate, and grief is the kind of thing that is so easily triggered by music. So I can't comprehend it, when I say it out loud like this. And I mean, that's probably why people like Dave don't really want to go back and play Nirvana songs, because it's really hard to do those kinds of things, even if you can. And that's a big if, even if you can zone out and just play the song, it's music is loaded in that way. And that's one of the things I adore about music. But Taylor was the drummer in this band, not quite from the outset, but for most of its life. Again, back to Jack Black, the running joke at the Hall of Fame introduction was it must have really annoyed Dave that he got the one drummer in the world who was better than him. And they, he called him his brother. You could, anytime you watched an interview with them, you could see how close they were. It's not usual for a band to have the lead singer and the drummer be the two most front facing people. It's usually the lead singer and the guitarist, maybe a bass player if his name is Paul McCartney.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, it's, I can't imagine. I'm hopeful as a fan, and as somebody who has like nothing but respect for everybody involved in Foo Fighters. I'm hopeful that they can carry on, but it is possible that this may be the end of it.
Yeah, it might be. And we've seen, they've had some tribute shows in Wembley Stadium and in LA, and Taylor's son, Oliver Shane Hawkins, has played drums on My Hero with the band, and that was a wonderful moment. But I certainly wouldn't hold it against Dave or the band if they just wanted to say we had a great run and just sort of venture out and maybe find new creative outlets. But if Dave never appears on the show again, or Foo Fighters and some incarnation never appear on the show again, I think Dave has just an amazing case as an SNL Hall of Famer. So what's your kind of wrapping it up ultimate case for Dave Grohl's induction into the SNL Hall of Fame, if you had to sum it up?
Look at the scoreboard. Numbers don't lie. Like 14 times. Seriously, like that is more than Paul Simon. That is that's unbelievable to really fathom. And not only is he like more than Paul Simon and 14 times, there's nobody else in double digits. And a lot of the ones that are up at like 7 or 8, I don't know how many more times they're going to show. Like, I think like Kanye's at 7, but right now I don't think anybody wants to invite Kanye to anything. Beck is at like 7. Arcade Fire is at something like 5 or 6, but I guess same thing. I don't know what's the future of that band. You know, you gotta respect numbers. I'm a sports person, and you know, I have nothing but respect for Cal Ripken. I have nothing but respect for Bill Russell and Wayne Gretzky, Tom Brady. You know, numbers don't lie.
There's my contribution musically to the show. Dave Grohl. Not a bad conversation there from our friends Ryan McNeil and Thomas Senna. What do you think? To me, I think potentially this is our first musical guest that makes the Hall of Fame. I think that while not necessarily a traditional first ballot Hall of Famer, I think Grohl ticks a lot of boxes that boomers know him, Gen X knows him, Gen Y knows him, and Gen Z to a certain degree knows him as well. And I think that is going to help his case in terms of getting in the hall. But to quote Ryan, numbers don't lie. 14 times. That's a staggering feat for a host or musical guest, any of the categories that we look at here in the hall. So does he have your vote? That's the question. Does he have your vote? Because that's what it's going to come down to. The way this works is you're going to vote. Now, how do you get that vote? Well, you need to register. You need to register to vote. By doing that, you basically give us your email address so that we can send you the ballot when the time comes. It's really unintrusive, and it's an easy way to score some points with me, quite frankly, because, I'll just love it if you do that. So there's that. Now let's get into the case for Dave Grohl. This is the aforementioned Times Like These from 2020. This is a fantastic performance of this song, and you're going to love it. So this is Dave Grohl and the Foo Fighters with Times Like These on the SNL Hall of Fame podcast.
I'm a one-way motorway. I'm a road that drives away, follows you back home. I'm a street light shining. I'm a white light blinding bright, burning off and on. It's times like these you learn to live again. It's times like these you give and give again. It's times like these learn to love again. It's times like these, time again. I'm a new day rising. I'm a brand new sky to hang the stars upon tonight. But I'm a little divided. Do I stay or run away? Leave it all behind. It's times like these learn to live It's times like these you give and give again. It's times like these you learn to love again. It's times like these, time and time again.
All right. Yeah, that was Foo Fighters featuring Dave Grohl, our nominee this week on the program. What a great rendition of that song. And it's even richer when you consider the context that Ryan and Thomas talked about during their conversation. I thought that was remarkable, and it really made me enjoy that a lot. So from the bottom of my heart, Ryan, thank you so much for stopping by. And on behalf of Matt and Thomas, it's great to know you all, and we have a great time doing this. And, keep coming back. Tell your friends about the SNL Hall of Fame podcast. If they like SNL, they like long form interviews, they might get a kick out of this show. So, with stakes. There's stakes at hand here. We're going to have almost 50 nominees at the end of this season. And that's a tremendous opportunity for some great talent to make it into the Hall of Fame. I cannot wait. So make sure you've registered to vote. And again, tell your friends, tell the whole bunch. I just had a hippopotamus for lunch. That's what I got for you this week. Hope you enjoyed yourself. Unbuckle your seatbelts now, walk down the hall past the Weekend Update exhibit, and turn out the lights on your way past, because the SNL Hall of Fame is now closed.
Thanks for listening to the SNL Hall of Fame podcast. Make sure to rate, review, share, and subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on social media at SNLHOF. This is Doug Denant saying, see you next week.
To podcasts and such.